In this video, we complete step 40, the read CSV function part 1. So completing this step will be the very last thing we do in this project, and after it's done, then the project will be complete. So it's a fairly difficult step, which is why I've broken it up into two parts. But the read CSV function is going to read in a comma-separated value text file and return a data frame from it. Now the read CSV function is only going to be able to handle very simple data frames or simple text files. CSV text files can be very difficult, and there's not necessarily a standard for them. So ours is only going to handle the very simplest cases. We're not going to go and dig into edge cases of for CSVs. So one thing to notice before we get started is that read CSV is a function. It is not a method. It is defined at the module level. So this is not part of the data frame class. You will not be accessing it with like df.readcsv. Instead, you'll be accessing it with like pdc.readcsv. So it is a function. It is not bound to any object, and it will return a data frame. So this function has one parameter. The parameter is the file location where the CSV is located in your file system. It's going to be a string. So fn is simply going to be where the file is located in your file system. All right, so we need to begin to create a dictionary mapping the column names to the column values. So what we're going to do here is we're going to assume that the first row in this file, so the first line in this file, is going to contain the column names. So let's go ahead and assume that. And before we get started coding, let's create a dictionary to hold all this data. So the dictionary will map the column name to the values. And since we won't know when we open the file how long the column is, what we're going to do is create a default dictionary with the default values as a list and just continually append each column value to the end of the list. So I'm going to go ahead and import the default dictionary again. Now we could have imported default dict at the very top to the entire module, but there's only two areas where we need it, so we're just going to import it relatively, or not relatively, but we're only going to import it within the the two places where we need it. So you could import it at the top. It's not really a big deal. We're just going to import it here so it's clear that we only need it in this function and the one other method from above, like in the pivot table method. Okay, so normally we create some variable name called new data, but before we get there, we'll just call it data. Sorry, we'll say it's the default dict will be a default dictionary of lists. We'll just call it data for now because we'll create new data. We'll have to iterate through this one more time in order to convert it to a NumPy array. So for the time being, we'll just call it data and assign it as a default dictionary. All right, so what we're going to do here is we need to open up this file. So we'll use the with statement, and we're going to pass in this file name. So this will open it up. This is how you open up files in Python, with the open function. And the with statement allows us to refer to this open file as f. So now f is the file, and we're going to assume the first line in the file is the where the column names are. So we're going to say the first line. We're going to read. There's a read line method for files. So that's going to read this. So we're going to read that in. And what we're going to do here, we'll read this in, and we'll actually reassign it. Or actually, we could say, we can even use a different variable. Say column names equals header. So at the end of every line, there's going to be a new line character. So what we need to do here is strip it off with the strip method. So backing up just a little bit, header is going to be a string of that very first line in the file. Okay, so it's a comma separated string. So it's a string with a bunch of column names separated by commas. The very last character is typically going to be a new line character, and we can use the strip method in order to strip this from there. And then what we can do is we can use the split method, which will split our string into into a list. So it'll, wherever it sees a comma, it will make that split. Okay, so let's actually go ahead and actually just return the column names and see if this actually works with some actual data. So let's go back to our Jupyter Notebook, and let's call pdc.readcsv, and there is a sample data file. It's called employee.csv, and that looks good. So it returned the very first row of that CSV. Now you can actually open up this CSV in the notebook if you wish. So if you go into the data folder, or not in the notebook, but using Jupyter to open it up. So if you click on this, you'll actually able to open up the CSV, and you can see that it read everything in correctly. That's that first line. Okay, so I'll keep that open just so we can refer back to it. And let's go back to our code. So we don't care about the column names here. So we've opened that, we've extracted the column names. So what we're going to do here now is we need to iterate through every other line in the data frame. So we have the column names as a list, and that's good. So let's iterate through every other line in the file. So files are iterable. So when you do this, line will take on the very next line in the file. So we read in the first line, so we're already on the second line of this file F. So we need to basically do the same thing for the values here. So we could say values equal, and then we could just say line dot, do the same thing. We'll strip away the last character, and then we'll split on the comma. So we're going to get all these values here. So this is all the comma separated values, and what we'll need to do here is, so what we can do here is we can actually zip up the column names with the values, and we can actually do an iteration here, and we can say for col comma val in this zipped up column names and values, why don't we just take the data.col and append the val onto there. Okay, so let's just unpack this real quick one more time. So we're going to go through every other line in the file. So we're going to assume every other line in the file is some sort of data that's valid. That line is going to end in a new line character, so we're going to strip that off. Then we're going to use the split method to split the, to split all the data on all the commas that it sees, and it will return that as a list. So values is a list, same way as column names is a list. So these are going to be the same length. We're going to assume that they're the same length of the number of items in every row of data. So we can zip them up, and then we can iterate through each one and simply simply append whatever the current value is to that particular column. So this is going row by row, appending all this, appending each value one at a time. So let's actually return data over here. So let's go ahead and run this again, and I'll just assign this to this data, and we can look at this. So here's the keys. So if I look at just the department key, I'll get a list of all the departments. So let's say string, and we can look at all of the salaries, for instance, and notice that they are read in as strings here. So So it looks good. So we've read in all the data. It's very close to what we want. We have a dictionary of column names mapped to strings of all of our data in the CSV file. But that's all I wanted to complete in this step. In the next step, we're going to turn those into NumPy arrays and then finally create the data frame. So that does it for part 1 of step 40.